So, you need to step away from the lab benches. The voice cut through the chemistry wing like a blade, sharp, public, meant to sting. Every head turned. Goggles lifted. Phones rose. A few students stopped mid-titration, their droppers frozen above pink-stained flasks. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, cold and relentless, turning the polished tile into a stage. At the front of Lab 3, an old man stood with his hands clasped behind his back. His coat was plain. His shoes were scuffed. His hair was a soft storm of gray, cropped close. On his left hand, a thick gold ring caught the light when he moved, subtle, worn, not flashy. He didn't flinch. Across from him, Mr. Donnell Pike, AP chemistry teacher, department chair, the kind of authority that wore itself like cologne, tilted his chin toward the door as if the room belonged to his voice alone. You can't just walk into a restricted lab, Pike said louder, making sure every student heard. This is a safety issue. This is liability. The old man's gaze moved calmly from the teacher's face to the wall of periodic tables, to the emergency shower, to the neat row of burettes hanging like glass pendulums. I'm not touching anything, he said gently. A snort came from somewhere in the back. Nervous laughter followed it like a weak echo. Pike's smile tightened, thin as tape. He wasn't smiling with humor. He was smiling with permission. Then why are you here? Pike asked. You lost. The old man didn't answer right away. He looked at the students instead, as if searching for something in their eyes. A girl with braids and a notebook hugged to her chest swallowed hard. A boy in a varsity jacket shifted, torn between discomfort and curiosity. Another student, phone already up, whispered, I'm live. The screen glow on his cheeks made him look like he was lit from below by a small, hungry fire. Pike took a step closer. This is a magnet school, he said, voice dripping with the pride of the selective. Students earn the right to be in this lab. Visitors don't just wander in off the street. Off the street. The old man's eyelids flickered once. Somewhere near the doorway, a security officer appeared, Officer Lyle, radio clipped to his chest, hands on his belt, posture tightened with the practiced readiness of someone told to expect trouble. Officer Lyle glanced at the old man, then at Pike. What's going on? He asked. Pike gestured as if presenting evidence. He came in without a badge, Pike said. No sign-in. No escort. He's refusing to leave. I'm responsible for these students. If something happens, he let the sentence hang where fear could decorate it. The room filled with a different kind of air. It wasn't oxygen. It was assumption. The old man's shoulders remained level, steady like a horizon. I'm not refusing, he said quietly. I'm waiting for the right person. Pike laughed, one short bark. The right person. He looked around the room like he was sharing a joke with the crowd. So, the right person is me. This is my classroom. And I'm telling you, politely, leave. A student near the front muttered, this is messed up. Someone else whispered back, Shah, it's about to go viral. The live streamer's phone rose higher. A notification sound pinged, someone joining. Then another, and another. Pike saw the phones. His posture grew taller with it, as if the attention fed him. Officer, Pike said, voice turning official, please escort him out. If he resists, I want him trespassed. We can't have strangers in here. Strangers. Officer Lyle stepped forward, hand lifting in a gesture that was meant to be calming but landed like a warning. Sir, he said to the old man, I'm going to need you to come with me. The old man nodded once, slow. I hear you, he said. He turned his head slightly, as if listening to something beyond the room. A distant sound. Footsteps in the hallway. Not hurried. Not panicked. Measured. Certain. The old man's eyes lifted toward the door, and for the first time, something like anticipation warmed his expression. Pike leaned in, smug. What? You think you've got backup? Pike murmured, low enough to feel private, loud enough for the front row to catch it. You think you can just show up and play scientist? The old man looked at him and smiled. Not a grin, not a challenge. A calm, almost sorrowful smile, like someone watching a person step onto a trapdoor they don't know is open. The footsteps got closer. The old man said, softly, I'm not playing. The door handle turned, and every phone in the room tilted toward it as if pulled by gravity. He woke before dawn, the way he always did, long before the world decided to be awake. The apartment was small. Not poor, not grand. Functional. Neat. The kind of place that told you its owner didn't collect clutter because his mind collected enough. He boiled water in a dented kettle and watched steam curl upward like a thought trying to escape. On the kitchen table lay an envelope with the school district's logo stamped in the corner. Inside was a letter, a student's letter. He'd read it 3 times the night before, then once more at midnight when sleep refused to come. "Dear Sir," it began, handwriting tight, desperate, careful. "They said I should stop trying. They said I'm not that kind of student. I don't know what that means. I want to learn. I want to understand. I want to be someone who can build something that matters. My teacher says chemistry isn't for everyone, but I feel like it's for me. Please, if you ever come to the school, could you just listen?" It was signed, Marisol Vega. He held the letter now with both hands, thumb smoothing the edges as if he could soften the pain in it through touch. His name was Dr. Samuel Briggs. Most people didn't call him doctor anymore. Not in the grocery store. Not on the bus. Not when they saw the gray in his beard and the slowness in his gait. He didn't correct them. Not because he didn't care. Because he had learned something about dignity. It is not a title others grant you. It is a quiet agreement you make with yourself, and you keep it even when no one is watching. Samuel moved through his morning-like ritual. He dressed in a plain button-down shirt. He chose a jacket with elbows worn slightly shiny from years of leaning over lab benches. He took a small notebook and slid it into his inner pocket. On the first page, written in neat block letters, was a quote he'd copied decades ago. "If you want to see who someone is, watch who they think they can humiliate." He paused at the mirror by the door. The mirror didn't flatter him. It showed his age honestly. The lines at the corners of his eyes, the softened jaw, the shoulders that still carried strength but no longer performed it loudly. It also showed something else, something quieter, deeper, a steadiness that came from surviving storms without becoming one. He remembered other rooms, other voices, a university lecture hall where a professor once said, "You're very articulate," like it was a surprise. A corporate lab where a manager had called him aggressive for speaking with the same volume as everyone else. A conference where he stood beside a poster containing his own data while someone asked, "Whose work is this?" He remembered the first time he walked into a lab and smelled acetone and ethanol and possibility. He remembered the first time he watched a solution change color and felt his heart change with it. Chemistry was never just formulas to him. It was proof. Proof that the invisible could become visible. That the right conditions could transform a thing. That a reaction could be controlled, guided, understood, if you respected what was actually there instead of what you assumed. At 7 o'clock, he left his apartment. At 8 o'clock, he arrived at the bus stop. People looked through him the way cities do. Quick glances, categorizing, discarding. At 9 o'clock, he stood in front of a building he hadn't set foot in for 30 years. Ridgeway Magnet Academy. Glass doors. Stainless steel handles. A banner in the foyer. Excellence. Equity. Future. He almost laughed at how words could sit so clean while reality stayed messy. Samuel stepped inside. A receptionist looked up, eyes sliding over him. "Yes," she said, tone already impatient, already tired of a problem she didn't want. Samuel smiled. "I'm here for the chemistry department," he said. "I have an appointment." Her eyebrows lifted a fraction. Not disbelief, something worse. Calculation. "What's your name?" she asked. "Samuel Briggs." She typed, nails clicking like small accusations. Her lips pressed together. "I don't see you," she said. Samuel didn't argue. He simply reached into his pocket and pulled out a printed email. Confirmation, time, room number. He slid it across the counter. She took it, eyes narrowing, then frowned. "HM," she said. "Well, someone must have forgotten to add you to the system." Forgotten. Samuel nodded as if that word didn't have history. "Could you call the department chair?" he asked. "Mr. Pike." The receptionist's gaze flicked up again. She looked Samuel up and down one more time, lingering where people linger when they're deciding what you are worth. Then she picked up the phone. Chemistry, she said after the ring. There's a man here asking for Mr. Pike. A pause. Her voice lowered, amused. Yes. No badge. Older. Another pause. Then she hung up, still holding the email like it might stain her fingers. He's in Lab 3, she said. Down the hall. But you'll need a visitor sticker. She opened a drawer, rummaged, and pulled out an empty roll. Her mouth twisted. We're out, she said. Samuel waited for the solution. She didn't offer one. He could have pushed, could have insisted, could have demanded. But he'd learned another lesson about power. Some people only recognize force. And he wasn't interested in being mistaken for what they needed to fear before they could respect. He nodded. I'll head that way, he said. The hall smelled like floor polish and teenage deodorant, ambition and anxiety. As he walked, he passed bulletin boards with college acceptances and science fair trophies. He passed posters of famous scientists. Curie, Einstein, Bohr, Feynman, no one who looked like him. He paused at one display titled, Donors Who Make Ridgeway Possible. Names engraved in gold on a black plaque. At the bottom, a newer plate shone brighter than the rest. The Briggs Foundation, STEM Equity Initiative. Samuel's fingers hovered near the letters, not touching. He didn't need to. He remembered every meeting, every signature, every check. He remembered his wife, Lillian, sitting beside him at their kitchen table years ago, saying, if we have the power to make doors open, we have to, even if we never get to walk through them again. He remembered her illness, the hospital smell, the way she'd squeezed his hand and whispered, make it count. After she died, he had poured his grief into something that could outlive it. Scholarships, labs, equipment, partnerships, not to be praised, to be useful. And now, a student had written to him like a flare sent up in the dark. So he kept walking. He found Lab 3. He pushed the door open quietly and walked into the confrontation that had been waiting for him like a loaded spring. The door swung inward, and Samuel didn't step fully inside at first. He listened. The room was alive with murmurs and the faint, electric whisper of phones. Mr. Pike's voice filled the space like a trumpet call. And for the last time, Pike was saying, you can't just stand here. This is a school. These are minors. We can't have unknown individuals hovering around. Samuel entered. The sentence broke when Pike saw him. For half a second, Pike's expression flickered, surprised that Samuel had returned, or surprised that he hadn't disappeared as expected. Then Pike's face hardened, as if his pride had been slapped. Oh, Pike said, voice rising. You're back. Officer Lyle shifted his stance, more late now. Samuel stayed near the front benches, careful not to cross into the students' work area. His hands remained visible, open, empty. Pike addressed the class like a courtroom. This, he announced, is exactly what I'm talking about. Entitlement. Ignoring rules. Thinking you can bypass protocols. Entitlement. Samuel's gaze went to the students again. Some looked uneasy. Some looked entertained in that way people do when they are relieved the heat isn't on them. And some, just a few, looked angry. Quietly, bravely. Pike turned toward one of the phones. He snapped at the student live streaming. Put that away. This isn't content. The student hesitated. He wasn't scared of Pike. He was scared of missing the moment the internet devoured. It's public, the student muttered, half defiant. People are watching. Pike's jaw clenched. He faced Samuel again. Who are you? Pike demanded. What's your business, hey? Samuel took a breath. I'm here for a meeting, he said. With you. Pike blinked. Then he laughed again, louder this time, as if he'd just been handed the easiest win. With me. He spread his hands toward the class. Class, do we have meetings with random people who wander in? Is that a safety standard? Is that acceptable? A few students chuckled, the sound thin and forced. Samuel's calm didn't change. Pike leaned closer, voice dropping into that sharp, humiliating intimacy meant to cut while pretending it wasn't loud. You don't belong in here, Pike said. There it was. Not you don't have a badge. Not we need to sign you in. Not even we don't know you. You don't belong. Samuel's eyes held Pike's. I've been in more labs than you've taught classes, Samuel said softly. The room stilled a fraction. Pike's mouth twisted. Oh, he said. Then you should be able to answer a simple question, right? Since you're so experienced. He turned to the whiteboard and began writing with quick, aggressive strokes. Markers squeaked. Students leaned forward. Pike wrote a multi-step chemistry problem. Dense, lead. Thermodynamics. Kinetics. Equilibrium. A reaction mechanism with competing pathways. An impossible exam-style puzzle designed to make even top students sweat. He underlined the final instruction. Predict the dominant product and calculate the equilibrium composition at 298 K, given H degree, S degree, and activation energy values. Show full derivation. Pike capped the marker with a snap and turned back. Go ahead, he said. You're here hovering around my students. Prove you're not a distraction. Solve it. A wave of energy rippled through the crowd. Phones zoomed in on the board. The live stream chat, though unheard, could be imagined. The scroll of judgment, the emojis, the hot takes, the cruel humor that always shows up early. Officer Lyle shifted again, glancing between Samuel and Pike like he wanted this to end quickly. Pike crossed his arms. Let's see, he said. You say you've been in more labs. If you can't solve that, you're done. You leave, and I'll have you trespassed. Trespassed. From a school he had helped build with money that had come from long nights and brilliant risks. From a lab he had funded with a foundation created in the name of a woman who had believed in students who didn't belong. The humiliation in the room sharpened, ready to bite. Samuel didn't bristle. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look to the crowd for defense. He looked at the board, and something in him clicked into place. Not anger, not revenge. Focus. Like stepping into an old pair of gloves. He moved to the marker tray and picked up a marker. His hand was steady. Pike's eyes narrowed. A student near the front whispered, "He's actually going to try." Another whispered, "This is insane." The live streamer's phone shook slightly. "Yo," the student breathed. "This is about to be crazy." Samuel's marker touched the board, and before he wrote a single line, he said, quietly enough that the nearest students had to lean in, "You picked the wrong kind of impossible." Pike scoffed. "Excuse me." Samuel didn't answer. He began to write. At first, the room heard only the marker. Squeak. Pause. Squeak. Samuel didn't rush. He organized the problem the way you organize chaos when you understand it. Naming variables, defining assumptions, clarifying what Pike had tried to make confusing. He rewrote the reaction scheme with cleaner arrows. Then he wrote, Step 1. Determine G degree equals H degree TS degree. His handwriting was crisp, practiced, not a shaky scrawl, not the uncertain lines of someone guessing. The work of someone who had taught molecules how to behave for a living. Students began leaning forward without realizing it. Pike's smirk softened, just slightly, the way confidence does when it meets something it didn't predict. Samuel calculated G degree at 298K. His mental arithmetic quick, his conversions clean. He wrote the equilibrium constant expression. Then he paused, lifted the marker, and added a small note. Assuming ideal behavior is a trap here. Use activity approximation for ionic strength. A hush slipped across the room. One student's mouth fell open. Wait, she whispered. That's what Dr. Hand said in lecture at the university. Samuel kept going. He derived the relationship between K and G degree. Then he stepped sideways and wrote the Arrhenius relation for the competing pathways, comparing activation energies and pre-exponential factors. He circled the dominant pathway and underlined it twice. Then he did something that made several students gasp. He corrected Pike's problem. Not rudely, not with a flourish, with a single calm line. Given values imply the stated intermediate cannot be stable. Mechanism must proceed via transient complex. He wrote the corrected pathway. Then he solved it. Fully, neatly. He ended with the equilibrium composition. Percentages balanced, checked, and boxed. He set the marker down, turned, and faced the room. Silence held for a beat longer than comfort. The students were still. Even Officer Lyle looked like he'd forgotten to breathe. Pike stayed at the board. The teacher's face went pale in a way that wasn't just shock. It was recognition of being outclassed in front of witnesses. Pike forced a laugh. "That's cute," he said, voice too bright. "You wrote a bunch of stuff. Doesn't mean it's right." Samuel didn't react. A student in the second row raised her hand without thinking, like she was in class. "Mr. Pike," she said carefully, that looks right." Pike snapped his eyes toward her. "Do you teach this class?" he hissed. "No, so don't." He turned back to Samuel, anger rising now that his authority had slipped. "Even if you memorized something," Pike said, "you still have no right to be in here. This is a school. You are not staff. You are not faculty. You are." He searched for a word that would hurt without sounding like hate. He found it. "You're a liability." Samuel blinked once. Then he reached into his jacket. The room tightened instantly. Officer Lyle's hand moved toward his radio. "Sir," the officer warned, "keep your hands where I can see them." Samuel's hand emerged holding something small. Not a weapon. A folded letter. A printed email. And a sleek black card. He walked, slowly, deliberately, to the front desk where Pike's laptop sat open beside a stack of graded quizzes. Samuel placed the card down. It was heavy, matte, embossed. Pike glanced at it, then froze, because the card wasn't a visitor pass. It was an identification card, a district-level credential with a gold seal. And beneath Samuel's photo, it read, "Dr. Samuel Briggs, Chair, Ridgeway STEM Oversight Board." Pike's throat bubbed. Samuel placed the email down too. Larger print, more official. Then the letter. Marisol's letter. Pike's eyes flicked to it, then away. Samuel looked at the class. "My appointment was scheduled," Samuel said calmly, "for 10:15, with Mr. Pike, regarding student outcomes in advanced science tracks." Pike swallowed. Officer Lyle leaned in, reading the credential, eyes widening. "What?" the officer murmured. Samuel turned the card slightly so the room could see. Phone zoomed in instantly. The live streamer whispered, almost reverent now, "No way." A student gasped, hand flying to her mouth. Another murmured, "That's the foundation guy. The plaque in the hall, that's him." Pike tried to recover, scrambling for his footing like a man on ice. "This is ridiculous," Pike stammered. "You should have announced yourself." Samuel tilted his head. "I did," he said, "at the front desk." Pike's face flushed. The silence in the room grew enormous, thick, cinematic, the kind of silence that contains an entire reversal in its weight. Then the footsteps in the hallway arrived. The door opened wider. A woman in a tailored blazer stepped in. Principal Amina Cho, eyes sharp, presence immediate. Behind her came two people in district lanyards. And one more figure, an older woman with silver hair, wearing a university badge and carrying a folder full of documents. Principal Cho's gaze landed on Samuel first. Relief. Then it flicked to Pike. "Ice." "Dr. Briggs," Principal Cho said, voice controlled, "I'm so sorry." Pike's mouth opened. Principal Cho didn't look at him yet. She looked at the students, then the phones. "Everyone," she said, "I need you to stop recording." No one moved, because the room had crossed a line where the truth demanded witnesses. Samuel spoke gently, not to Principal Cho, but to the air itself. "Let them," he said. The principal hesitated. Samuel's eyes held hers, steady. She nodded once, reluctantly. Pike's voice cracked. This is an ambush." Samuel turned to him. "No," he said. "It's accountability arriving on time." The next 48 hours moved like a storm front. Fast, loud, unstoppable. The livestream clip, "Teacher Humiliates Elder, Gets Destroyed by Genius Board Chair," hit 1 million views before midnight. Then 5 million by morning. National accounts picked it up. So did local news. So did people who had never heard of Ridgeway Magnet Academy but had lived their own versions of that room, of that tone, of that word, belong. Students began posting their own stories. Not all of them about Pike, at first. They wrote about the micro-cuts they'd learned to accept as normal. "How are you in honors? You're surprisingly good at this. Are you sure you didn't cheat? One former student posted a screenshot of an email from Pike dated 2 years earlier. Maybe consider a different track. Some students just don't have a natural aptitude. Another posted a voice memo. Pike's voice, annoyed, saying, "I can't slow down for everyone." The school district's phone lines flooded. Sponsors called. University partners called. And the Briggs Foundation, quiet for years, doing its work without attention, released a single statement. "We fund systems that uplift students. We do not fund systems that humiliate them." Behind closed doors, the consequences became concrete. An emergency board meeting was called. The district initiated an investigation into discriminatory practices, classroom conduct, and uneven student placement in advanced courses. Mr. Pike was placed on administrative leave pending review. He stood in the principal's office, jaw clenched, insisting it was a misunderstanding, insisting he was protecting safety, insisting he was being targeted. But the evidence was a flood. Grade patterns, recommendation patterns, discipline patterns, emails, statements, witnesses. Officer Lyle submitted a written report describing how quickly Pike had escalated to trespass threats without confirming identity, how the language used had been unnecessarily inflammatory. Students were interviewed. Some cried. Some shook with anger. Some looked relieved, like someone had finally pulled a thorn out that they thought they had to live with forever. Marisol Vega, the student who had written the letter, sat in a small conference room with a counselor and answered questions with trembling hands. "Yes," she said softly. "He told me chemistry wasn't for me. He said I should do something more realistic." "What did that mean to you?" the investigator asked. Marisol stayed at the table. "It meant I was too much of something," she whispered, "and not enough of something else." The district's lawyers got involved. So did the teachers' union. So did the foundation's legal team, because funding contract had clauses about equity compliance. Sponsors began reconsidering donations. A local tech company paused a planned partnership. A university withdrew a summer program temporarily. Even the stock of a vendor tied to school contracts dipped after a major client announced they were reviewing relationships connected to the scandal. And in the middle of it, Samuel didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. He visited Marisol. He sat with her in the library, away from cameras, away from noise. He listened, because consequences weren't just headlines. They were people, and people carried bruises longer than the internet carried outrage. Pike's world began to shrink. Friends stopped calling. Colleagues avoided eye contact. A neighbor, once friendly, suddenly became polite and distant, like politeness could disinfect association. He tried to defend himself online. It backfired. He posted, "I was ensuring safety and academic integrity." The comments buried him. Integrity, like humiliating someone in front of kids. Safety, like calling security because of how he looked. Academic, he solved your problem like it was breathing. Then came the lawsuit threat. Not from Samuel. From families. From former students who now had records of being pushed out of advanced tracks, scholarships missed, opportunities delayed. The district offered mediation, then realized it might not be enough. The story had moved from one man's humiliation to a system's exposure. And systems don't like being seen. But once seen, they can't unsee themselves. A week after the confrontation, the school held an assembly in the auditorium. They tried to frame it as a community conversation. But everyone knew what it was. A reckoning. The stage lights were too bright, making the faces in the front row look carved. Students filled the seats, buzzing with the energy of history happening where they sat today. Parents stood along the walls, arms crossed, eyes watchful. Teachers sat together in clusters like islands. Cameras were there, of course. News, phones, the glow of attention. Samuel walked onto the stage without music. No dramatic announcement, just footsteps and quiet. He wore the same plain jacket. He stood at the podium and waited until the room settled. He looked out across the crowd. He saw fear. He saw anger. He saw shame. He saw hope trying to stand up without getting knocked down again. When he spoke, his voice wasn't booming. It didn't need to be. It carried because it was true. "I want to tell you something about chemistry," Samuel began. A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. then quiet. In chemistry, he said, we learn that what you see is not always what you get. A clear solution can hold danger. A cloudy one can hold medicine. Two harmless things can combine and become something powerful. He paused, and in people, he continued, what you see is also not always what you get. His eyes moved, slow, careful. I walked into a classroom last week and was treated like a threat, he said. Not because of what I did, because of what someone decided I must be. The room tightened. Samuel didn't let the tension turn into fire. He let it become light. I have been called many things in my life, he said. Some of them accurate, some of them convenient for other people. But the most dangerous thing anyone can do is decide what someone else is worth before they've even spoken. He leaned forward slightly, hands resting on the podium. There are students sitting here who have been told, directly or indirectly, that certain rooms aren't for them, he said. That certain subjects aren't for them. That certain futures aren't for them. A few students lowered their heads. Others lifted their chins, eyes wet. Samuel's voice softened. Listen to me, he said. If you love something, if your mind lights up when you touch it, then it is for you. You don't need permission to be curious. You don't need permission to be brilliant. He paused again, letting the words land. Now, he said, to the adults. The teachers shifted. Some braced. Some looked down. Samuel didn't accuse the entire room. He didn't paint everyone with one brush. He spoke like a surgeon, not a hammer. Authority is not a license to humiliate, he said. A title doesn't make you trustworthy. A badge doesn't make you just. Your job is not to guard doors like you own them. Your job is to teach students how to walk through doors, especially the ones that were built to shut them out. The auditorium was silent, the kind of silence that feels like a held breath. Samuel's eyes sharpened, not with cruelty, but with clarity. Bias is not always loud, he said. Sometimes it wears a professional smile. Sometimes it hides behind the word standards. Sometimes it calls it self-concern. But the outcome is what tells the truth. He placed a hand over his chest. I'm not here to destroy anyone, he said. I'm here to remind us what dignity looks like. He glanced toward the students. Dignity is how you treat someone when you have power over them, he said. It's how you speak when no one is forcing you to be kind. It's what you do with the chance to either lift someone or crush them. His voice steadied, warm, unwavering. If you want a quote to remember, he said, remember this. A classroom is not a courtroom. It should never feel like one. A murmur moved through the crowd. Samuel lifted his chin. And another, he added. If your excellence requires someone else's humiliation, it isn't excellence. It's insecurity in a fancy suit. A few parents nodded slowly. A teacher in the back blinked rapidly, holding back tears. Samuel took a breath. We will fix what we can fix, he said. We will admit what we have to admit. We will listen where we have failed to listen. He looked at the students again, voice softening into something almost tender. And to the students, he said, I'm sorry for every time an adult made you feel small in a place built to help you grow. He stepped back from the podium. I can't undo what happened, he said. But I can promise you this. We will build something better than what we inherited. He nodded once. Then he walked off the stage. No victory music. No applause at first. Just stunned quiet. Then, somewhere in the middle rows, a student began clapping. 1, 2. Then the sound caught like a reaction reaching its threshold. The auditorium rose into a standing ovation that didn't feel like celebration. It felt like release. 7 months passed. Winter melted into spring. The trees outside Ridgeway budded with new green, the kind that looked impossible after cold. The chemistry wing looked different, not in ways a brochure would brag about first, though the equipment was upgraded and the lab benches were refinished. It looked different because of what was on the walls. A new series of posters, not just famous names, faces, local scientists, former students, community college professors, a black chemical engineer who ran a water purification startup, a Latina biochemist who worked in pediatric research, an Asian American materials scientist who designed batteries. And yes, Marie Curie was still there. But she wasn't alone anymore in the story of who belonged. The school implemented changes that weren't performative. Placement recommendations were audited. Advanced course entry required transparent criteria, and an appeals process that didn't punish students for asking. Teachers underwent bias training that wasn't a one-day checkbox but a sustained program with accountability. Students formed a STEM advisory council with direct access to leadership. Marisol Vega's name appeared on a new list. Ridgeway Chemistry Scholars. She stood at the front of Lab 3 one afternoon, explaining a reaction mechanism to a group of younger students. Her hands still shook sometimes when adults raised their voices. But her eyes didn't flinch anymore. Samuel visited once a month. Not as a savior, as a witness, as a reminder. He sat in the back of classrooms. He listened to students' questions. He watched teachers learn new ways to speak. Some teachers resisted at first. A few left. Not everyone wanted to be part of change that required humility. Mr. Pike's case concluded in late spring. The investigation found patterns of misconduct and discriminatory behavior. His contract was terminated. He appealed. The appeal failed. He tried to rebrand himself online as a victim of cancel culture. But the schools he applied to asked for references, asked for records, asked questions he could no longer dodge. He moved to a different town. He kept his head down. For the first time in years, he was forced to sit with the echo of his own words. And sometimes, in that quiet, he remembered the old man's calm. Not as an enemy, as a mirror. Some people hardened under that kind of reflection. Some softened. It wasn't clear what would happen to Pike. Redemption is always possible, but it requires truth. And truth is expensive. Samuel's life didn't become a parade. He didn't go on talk shows, though invitations came. He didn't chase fame, though the internet tried to crown him. He returned to his apartment, to his kettle, to his notebook. But he also started something new. A Saturday chemistry clinic at the public library. No prerequisites. No gatekeeping. Just tables covered in safe materials and curious hands. Baking soda volcanoes for little kids. pH testing for middle schoolers. Spectroscopy demonstrations for high schoolers. And for anyone who asked, he taught the deeper math too, because he never believed in dumbing things down. He believed in lifting people up. One Saturday, Marisol showed up to volunteer. She wore goggles and a grin. A younger student stared at her and asked, "Are you, like, a real chemistry person?" Marisol laughed, soft, bright. "I'm becoming one," she said. Samuel watched from across the room, eyes shining in a way the cameras never fully captured. Not pride in himself, pride in the chain reaction of possibility. So here's the question that lingers long after the clip ends, long after the headlines fade, long after the room goes quiet. When someone walks into a space you think is yours, do you greet them with curiosity? Or do you reach for a reason they don't belong? And if you've ever had the power to make someone feel small, what would it take for you to choose dignity instead?